All right, guys, so we got a whole bunch of really important updates that I want to get to in this video. We have Donald Trump pushing for a $1 trillion U.S. military budget at the same time that he's threatening a full-blown war with both Yemen and Iran. We also have some big updates on some of the various lies from Israel surrounding what I think is one of the most egregious war crimes that I've covered over the last 18 months being fully and completely exposed. And we also have, in the meantime, wanted fugitive war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu once again visiting Washington, D.C. to bipartisan open arms here. And here we have a video of our president, Donald Trump, once again, as he did last time, being very polite and dutifully pushing the chair in for Benjamin Netanyahu. And this comes not one day after Israel shot and killed a Palestinian American child in the West Bank. One day later, and that's how our president is acting. Now, some details in terms of what happened here. They say Omar Mohammed Rabia, a 14-year-old Palestinian with U.S. citizenship, was shot and killed on Sunday by Israeli forces near the West Bank town of Termis Aya, northeast of Ramallah. They say two other Palestinian American boys, aged 14 and 15, were also shot and wounded, one in the abdomen and one in the thigh. Both were taken to a nearby clinic in the village of Abu Falah, according to the Palestinian Red Crescent. They also say that the Israeli military has acknowledged that its forces opened fire on the three children who were standing near a road that was adjacent to the town. They say a video released by the military shows the teenagers appearing to throw an object. In a statement, the military claimed that it had identified three terrorists who were throwing rocks at a highway, and that Israel's fighters fired at the terrorists, killing one and wounding the other two. So throwing rocks, to Israel at least, if you are a Palestinian, means you're not only a terrorist, but that your sentence is immediate execution. For a child, throwing a rock. Now, they continue. They say the military reportedly seized Omar's body from the hospital and is still withholding it. They also say that the WAFA reports that Israeli forces delayed ambulance crews from reaching the scene, which would not be anything shocking or new. And they finish off here saying the killing comes amid a sharp rise in settler and military violence across the West Bank. While the Biden administration had previously sanctioned a handful of violent settlers, those sanctions were then rescinded by the Trump administration, which also recently approved the sale of over 20,000 U.S.-made assault rifles to Israel, a $24 million deal that was previously delayed over concerns that the weapons could be used by extremist Israeli settlers. Now, we continue to a little bit more of the ethnic cleansing plan talk here from Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. So let's go ahead and watch this first clip where Trump, in an incredibly dystopian way, lays out his plan for peace, which again is full-blown ethnic cleansings. Let's go ahead and watch this clip here.
Well, you know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate, and I think it's something that we would be involved in, but having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing. Because right now, all it is for years and years, all I hear about is killing and Hamas and problems. And if you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom zone. You call it the freedom zone, a free zone, a zone where people aren't going to be killed every day. That's a hell of a place. It's you know what I call it, a great location that nobody wants to live in, because they really don't. And when they have good living, real living, where Hamas and all of the problems they have, the level of death on the Gaza Strip is just incredible. And I've said it. I don't understand why Israel ever gave it up. Israel owned it. It wasn't this man, so I can say it. He wouldn't have given it up. I know him very well. There's no way. They took oceanfront property and they gave it to people for peace.
Okay, so a lot going on there. I don't think there's any question at this point that Trump is serious about this plan. The plan is very clear. They couldn't make it any more clear than this. The plan is to use Israel's continued genocidal onslaught on the Gaza Strip to pressure and to force people to other countries, surrounding countries, I guess, whoever would potentially work out a deal with Trump in his mind, and they will be forcefully expelled from the Gaza Strip, after which point the U.S., in coordination, I guess, with Israel, would then occupy the Gaza Strip and settle it for themselves, right? Notice the language that he is using here. He's not talking about the human beings in Gaza, right? He's not talking about their right to live on the land that they have lived on for generations, right? He's talking about this as oceanfront property, as great real estate, right? Those are the terms that he uses here. And then he also brings up, oh, there's been so much death in Gaza. All I'm seeing is death in Gaza. Bro, you are sitting next to, I don't even know if he's in this clip. There he is. You're sitting next to the guy who's causing that death. What are we talking about here? This is the man. This is the war criminal here that you're cozying up to, that's causing the death and destruction that has made Gaza unlivable, as you say, right? So, I mean, it's an absolutely unhinged, full-blown genocidal clip that we just watched. And he says it so casually, in front of all the cameras, in front of everybody, as if it's nothing, as if it's nothing. This is how normalized the death and destruction of the Palestinian people has become in this country. Now, we have a follow-up clip here of Netanyahu talking about essentially the same thing here. Let's go ahead and watch this.
And enabling the people of Gaza to freely make a choice, to go wherever they want. I mean, they should have that choice. And the president put forward a vision, a bold vision, which we discussed as well, including the countries that might be amenable and are amenable.
Again, it does not get more dystopian than this. Enabling the people of Gaza to freely make a choice to go wherever they want, I guess, except for their own fucking homes, right? You can go everywhere else, but not back to your home, is what he's saying here, right? They can go wherever they want, but don't step foot within the territorial boundaries of Israel, which apparently is about to be extended to the Gaza Strip, as well as the entirety of the West Bank. You can go anywhere else, though, just not your homeland, right? It's absolute insanity. Same as Trump saying, we're going to create a freedom zone. A freedom zone. This is the kind of language they're using to describe full-blown genocide and ethnic cleansing here. Now, we also have an update in terms of Israel forcing the Palestinians in Gaza into a smaller and smaller and smaller territory as they begin this ethnic cleansing project. So here from 972 magazine, that's been doing fantastic reporting throughout the last 18 months, they say here, connecting all these dots leads to a fairly clear conclusion. Israel is preparing to forcibly displace the entire population of Gaza through a combination of evacuation orders and intense bombardment into an enclosed and possibly fenced-off area. Anyone caught outside the boundaries of this area would then be killed, and buildings throughout the rest of the enclave would likely be razed to the ground. Without mincing words, this, quote, humanitarian zone, again, the language they use here is disturbing, right? Humanitarian zone, as Magal so kindly put it, in which the army intends to corral Gaza's 2 million residents, can be summed up in 2 words: concentration camp. This is not hyperbole. It is simply the most precise definition to help us better understand what we are facing. And that's entirely correct. There's no other way to put it. This is what they are doing. They're forcing the entire 2 million plus population of Gaza into a smaller and smaller confined area. This is a concentration camp that Israel is manufacturing in order for the end goal to either kill or expel the entire population of Gaza. And this has been clear for a very long time that this was their end goal. We said it over a year ago at this point. All you had to do was listen to what top Israeli officials were saying immediately after October 7th. They laid it out in the open exactly what their goals are. Now we're just at, stage 5 of this process towards the end. Now, we also have, again, an update to the story that I covered a few days ago, where Israel, with no exaggeration, shot at and then proceeded to execute upwards of 15 Palestinian medics who were rushing to a scene in Rafah to try to assist people who had been injured by Israeli attacks. Now, this is a report here by Trey Yingst, who works at Fox News. And I know it's Fox News, but shockingly, this guy, credit to him, has been one of the better journalists, I would say, in the mainstream media in terms of being honest about Israel's crimes. So let's go ahead and watch his clip here breaking down how Israel not only killed these paramedics, but then tried to cover it up and then proceeded to lie to the world about it.
Paramedics from the Palestine Red Crescent dig through the earth of southern Gaza. They're recovering the bodies of their colleagues killed by Israeli forces. On March 23rd, first responders were dispatched to this area of Rafah. When they arrived, Israeli soldiers opened fire.
Health workers should never be a target, and yet we're here today digging up a mass grave of first responders and paramedics.
On March 31st, the IDF provided a statement to Fox News saying, quote, several vehicles were identified advancing suspiciously toward IDF troops without headlights or emergency signals. Video released 5 days later by the Palestine Red Crescent directly contradicts that statement. The IDF also claimed in the initial findings that 9 out of the 15 medics were operatives in Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Asked multiple times for evidence to support that claim, none was provided. Funerals were held late last week for those killed by Israeli bullets. Families mourning the dead, mothers trying to make sense of the senseless. He went to save the martyrs and injured, and we've been waiting for him for a week. We were told that he was either martyred or injured, but I realized that they had killed them from the very first moment. They had killed them and buried them underground. As bodies of these medics rest inside white plastic bags with a photo attached, the face of Rifat Radwan stands out, the man who recorded his final moments with a final message. Forgive me, Mother. This is the path I chose, to help people, he said.
So, unfortunately, this is nothing new, right? This specific crime is pretty much, I think, as egregious as it gets when you're directly firing at clearly marked paramedics. And then the people you didn't get in the initial round of shooting, there were reports that some people were found handcuffed with bullet wounds to the backs of their heads. So you're then executing some of the survivors of the initial shooting. Then you're burying their bodies. You're crushing up the vehicles to try to cover up the crime that you just committed. You're preventing fellow aid workers or the UN from getting to the site so they couldn't see what happened for days and days on end. Then you're lying to the entire world about what happened, saying, oh, they were approaching us suspiciously. They didn't have their lights on. There were Hamas members in the vehicles. Every single part of that was a lie. Every single part of it. And again, unfortunately, that's nothing new. If we were to sit down and genuinely try to come up with the various assortment of lies that Israel has brazenly told to the US media and the rest of the world over the last 18 months of this genocide, you could come up with a list that's hundreds and hundreds of individual circumstances long. It would not be difficult to do that. They lie as easily as they breathe. Now, we continue. So, in terms of the US media angle of this, even after being caught in this lie, the US media's coverage has still been utterly and completely pathetic. So here we have an update from the New York Times, who got this big scoop here. Their headline is, Israel says its account of rescue workers killed in Gaza was partly mistaken. Oh, they were mistaken? Or did they just fucking lie to you? Like, which? It's not difficult to figure out what happened here. It wasn't a mistake. They just lied because they thought they could get away with it. That's what happened. Now, I mean, Tariq says here, oops, we mistakenly opened fire on a clearly marked paramedic vehicle for more than 5 minutes straight before rounding up the survivors and handcuffing and executing them. Then we mistakenly buried them in a mass grave, prevented rescue mission for days, and accused them of being terrorists. Oops. Oops, it was a mistake. It was a mistake. Now, we also have here from Dropsite News some further updates in regards to Gaza. A UN spokesperson for the Secretary General says, overall, we estimate that nearly 400,000 people have been displaced yet again, not for the first time, but again, since the breakdown of the Gaza ceasefire. That is 18% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip. No arrangements to secure their safety and survival have been made, and a responsibility that falls on Israel as an occupying power. This is the reported buffer zone that Israel is putting forward here. Again, notice how they are trying to concentrate the population into smaller and smaller areas. This entire location, this lighter gray here, they're saying is off limits. This is now a kill zone. They're eventually trying to squeeze them down, it looks like, into Al Mawasi, which is down here. But, I mean, we're talking about like half of the Gaza Strip that's now been blacked off here by Israel. Now, we continue. We also have continued attacks on Palestinian journalists. We covered, of course, one of Jeremy's colleagues over at Dropsite News, Hassam Shabbat, just a few weeks ago, I think at this point, who was directly assassinated, openly admitted by Israel. And here we have them again, once again, this time trying to kill Hassan Eslea in a strike that engulfed in flames a tent that was housing some of these journalists. I'll put this on low volume here because it's very loud audio, but here we can see some of the aftermath of this strike on the tent. You can see people clearly distraught, panicked, injured, and wounded, and you can see the aftermath of the fire of where this strike actually came down. Now, according to what I've read, I think he managed to escape being assassinated this time around, but this is, again, part of the broader project of what Israel has been doing in Gaza. There's a reason why they want the journalists dead, right? They don't want the world to be able to see what they're doing. This is how you end up in a situation where more journalists have been killed in Gaza over the last year and a half than in any other conflict in the history of recorded conflicts. Okay? More journalists are killed in Gaza than the rest of the world combined. That's not by accident. It's by targeted assassinations over and over and over again with complete and total impunity. We also have this disturbing clip here, moving on to a little bit of Yemen and Iran. Donald Trump, his official account, posted this. This is the kind of video that you used to have to go to WikiLeaks or something to find, right? You used to have to get this through like a U.S. whistleblower who would then be arrested by the U.S. government in order to get this kind of a war crime on camera. But here we have what Donald Trump claims are Houthis, right, gathered for instructions on an attack, and he says, oops, there will be no attack by these Houthis. They will never sink our ships again. And he posted this video proudly on his Twitter account where you can see a group of people gathered there in a circle where it looks like they dropped a bomb directly in the middle of them. Now, again, Trump is claiming, oh, they were Houthi terrorists. They're gathered in a circle to plan an attack or something. I've seen other pictures of similar situations. This looks to be a celebration of the end of Ramadan is what was actually going on here. Not an infrequent thing in Yemen for a group of people to be standing around in a circle like that to celebrate Eid. Now, some more details on that. Here from Democracy Now!, they say, the video shows a blast hitting over 70 people standing in an oval formation. Trump claimed the individuals targeted were Houthis preparing to carry out an attack, but according to reports in Yemen, the blast actually hit a tribal gathering to celebrate Eid, or the end of Ramadan. Trump administration has launched nearly daily attacks on Yemen since mid-March when the Houthis resumed attacks on ships in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden in support of Palestinians in Gaza. Now, keep in mind, guys, these attacks are not working, right? They're obviously not working. How do I know they're not working? Well, because Joe Biden was doing the same fucking thing. And in fact, rewind to a few years before that, the Saudis were also doing the same fucking thing to the Houthis. And they were not able to use a military solution to get what they wanted. In the specific case of what we're talking about right now, just ask the basic question. Why are the Houthis doing what they're doing? Why are they trying to impose a blockade of Israeli ships in the Red Sea? They're doing it because they view it as their obligation to stop a genocide, which the entire world should have an obligation to stop the genocide in Gaza, right? The Houthis took that upon themselves. One of the only groups in the entire face of the planet that's willing to do that. And so they're trying to impose a blockade in the Red Sea. Now, two different options in terms of what the U.S. and Israel could do in response to that. Option number one is you could end the genocide in Gaza. And as we saw during the ceasefire, when the Houthis stopped their attacks, that would lead to the end of it, right? You could stop the genocide. Stop trying to push forward with a full-blown ethnic cleansing plan for the Palestinians in Gaza. Stop dropping bombs on the heads of innocent men, women, and children by the dozens every single day. Stop the blockade of humanitarian goods from getting into Gaza. Those are the kinds of things you could do as option number one, to end this Red Sea blockade. Option number two just so happens to be an option that, again, is not going to work, but the option is you could just bomb the shit out of Yemen, one of the poorest countries on the face of the planet, that's already been bombed, that's already had thousands and thousands and thousands of people killed over the last number of years. You could do that and just keep bombing them and bombing them and bombing them for the fun of it, I guess. And when that doesn't work out, I guess this is where we go next, according to the Trump administration. They say here from a CNN article, the U.S. air campaign against the Houthis isn't working. Shocking. So things are moving to the next phase, which is apparently discussions of a ground offensive led by the internationally recognized government out of Aden, with U.S. potentially and KSA or Saudi and UAE support. So now the U.S., because the airstrikes aren't working, which was obvious from the beginning, now they're saying, okay, maybe let's do a ground invasion. Let's back our side of this equation here, the non-Houthi elements within Yemen. Let's get the Saudis involved. Let's get the UAE involved. And let's do a ground invasion of Yemen. So, I mean, ask yourselves that. Would you rather end the genocide in Gaza and bring an end to all of this? Or would you rather have the U.S. get involved in another endless Middle Eastern invasion? Ask yourself which one seems like the more logical and sound option out of those. We know which one Trump is going with. Now, on top of that, we have Iran, because it's not enough that we're continuing to support a genocide in Gaza. It's not enough that we're bombing civilians in Yemen. And one other thing that it's important to point out about Yemen is, let's just remind ourselves, the biggest scandal that came from the huge Signal Gate story, where Mike Waltz and Pete Hegseth and all these other guys accidentally added a journalist to their Signal group, and they were talking about how they were about to start bombing Yemen. The biggest scandal from that wasn't that they stupidly added a journalist to the chat. The biggest story was that they admitted to a brazen war crime, right? The so-called successful bombing that they engaged in was some like alleged Houthi missile tech or missile department head who they openly said was going into his girlfriend's apartment in Yemen. So they flattened the entire apartment building and killed a bunch of innocent people, right? In a brazen war crime. And nobody was even talking about that. Nobody was even asking the question of, why are we even bombing Yemen in the first place? Is this actually going to be effective in terms of reaching the end goals? Nobody was talking about that. They're talking about, how stupid and silly they are. They added a journalist. Isn't that so embarrassing? Oh, you leaked classified intelligence. But that wasn't the main story from that entire event. Now, again, moving on to Iran, here we have Trump, once again, with Benjamin Netanyahu, discussing his plans, because apparently we have some imminent, I guess, negotiations or initial stages of negotiations that Trump is going to be engaging with in regards to an Iran nuclear deal. And here he is saying that if they're not successful, all hell is going to break loose.
I think if the talks aren't successful with Iran, I think Iran is going to be in great danger. And I hate to say it, great danger, because they can't have a nuclear weapon.
So is that a yes?
You know, it's not a complicated formula. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's all there is.
So
Can't have it. Right now we have countries that have nuclear power that shouldn't have it. But I'm sure we'll be able to negotiate out of that, too, as part of this later on down the line. But Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
So how about we start with Israel, if we want to have a conversation about other countries that shouldn't have nuclear weaponry. How about we talk about Israel, that illegally and still to this day doesn't even really admit that they have one or that they have nuclear weapons in their arsenal? How about we start a conversation about that? No, it's okay for Israel to illegally obtain a nuclear weapon in violation of international treaties. It's not okay for Iran to do that, but it's okay for Israel to do that, right? In terms of whether or not Trump is actually going to get a deal, I have my doubts, right? We had a deal that was in place. Keep in mind, the Obama era Iran nuclear deal. Trump ripped it up to shreds. For what reason? Who knows, right? He didn't like the fact that it was done under Obama. He thinks, I'm going to get in, I'm going to do it way better myself, right? He then proceeds to escalate with Iran, kills a top Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, and almost brings us to the brink of war with them during his first term. So this time around, as he's once again saber rattling with them, what kind of a success do we think is going to come out of this? Right? Do we think that Trump is actually going to be able to negotiate some sort of a deal that Iran is going to agree to? Not to mention the fact that it's like, again, Israel has nuclear weapons. Can we just pause on that for a second? Nobody wants to talk about that fact. I guess not. Now, we also have here from Barak Ravid, again, in terms of how successful these negotiations are going to be. Netanyahu thinks the chances of a U.S.-Iran nuclear deal are extremely low, but will present to Trump today how a good deal should look like. So what does Benjamin Netanyahu think a good deal is? So Netanyahu wants the Libya model, full dismantling of Iran's nuclear program. There is another article that I saw where apparently he's demanding that in any sort of nuclear deal between the U.S. and Iran, which, by the way, why the fuck is Benjamin Netanyahu getting to dictate a deal that would be signed between the U.S. and Iran? Why should I give a single solitary shit what Benjamin Netanyahu thinks about that? Right? We are our own country. We can do our own negotiations. Thank you very much. Sit down. But Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly demanding that as a part of this hypothetical deal, it would involve the explosion of Iran's entire nuclear program. Not just any sort of pushes towards a nuclear weapon, but their entire, even civilian, like nuclear power program as well. And he says here openly, he wants the Libya model. Guys, this is not a mistake that he's saying Libya, okay? He's telegraphing a message to Iranian leadership. Because remember what happened to Libya. They gave up their weapons. They gave up their program. And what happened to the Libyan leader at the time, Gaddafi? What happened to him? Oh, he was overthrown in a US-backed coup and was murdered on camera? Oh, okay. And then Libya as a society, as a country, fell into years and years and years of bloody chaos? Oh, okay. So that's the model that we're proposing to Iran. Again, it's not an accident that he said that. Everybody knows the Libya model was a complete failure. So he's saying this intentionally to get Iran to reject any sort of deal. Because Benjamin Netanyahu is not interested in a deal. He's interested in war with Iran. That's what he wants. He wants a scorched earth war with Iran. He does not want a deal. Okay? Now, at the same time as all this saber rattling is going on, we also have here from Haaretz, an Israeli outlet, record-breaking U.S. deployment in the Middle East amid Trump's nuclear ultimatum for Iran. They say the U.S. deployed fighter squadrons, stealth bombers, air defense, and munitions near Iran and Yemen as March cargo flights rose by 50% compared to the previous peak since the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas war. So, guys, this might actually legitimately be happening. The worst nightmare that we could possibly imagine. Full-blown war with not only Yemen, but also Iran. This is what the Trump administration is, I wouldn't even say sleepwalking us towards. This is what he is full-blown aggressively marching us towards, is an outright war in the Middle East once again. And again, finishing off here, at the same time, we have him demanding a $1 trillion military budget. So there you go, guys. This is the Trump administration. So just to summarize, we have tax cuts for the rich. We have slashing social programs for the poor. We have the wealthiest man on earth who's ripping the federal government to shreds, illegally and unconstitutionally. We have Trump violating civil rights and due process all over the place, deporting people to foreign torture dungeons known for slave labor. And in the meantime, his tariff policy is potentially going to plunge us into a recession, lead to a spike in unemployment and inflation. And we also have a foreign policy that is, potentially, let's take over Greenland. Let's take over Panama. Let's take over the Gaza Strip. Let's occupy Gaza and go to war with Yemen and go to war with even Iran. So that's the Trump administration, guys. We are, what are we, 3 months into the Trump administration? This is somehow even way worse than I think the most hyperbolic attacks against him during the campaign could have predicted. It's somehow so much worse than what anybody could have thought it would be this quickly. Genuinely. So, there you have it, guys.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying